Yeah, I know. So many steps. Oh, beautiful. Thank you. All right. Good evening, everyone. How's it going? Welcome to our first meeting of the year. Come on in and have a seat. If you didn't get a chance to check in at the membership table, you can do so later. We're going to get started now. So welcome to the March 14th meeting of the Western Pennsylvania Mushroom Club. My name is Stephen. I'm the current president of the club, and I've got a couple updates I'm going to share. And then I'll introduce tonight's speaker. So if you are a member or you were a member last year, you probably received our newsletter, either a hard copy in the mail or you got an email to you. There's some great articles in there, including a recent scholarship recipient, some stuff on the City Nature Challenge, the DNA results from our link-off foray last year, a mushroom hunter survey, a bunch of other things. So check that out if you haven't yet. And we're always taking submissions. So if you want to contribute something to the newsletter, whether that's a recipe or a poem or some other writing, feel free to contact the newsletter editor. That's Cecily Franklin. So since our last meeting, which was in November last year, we've had some stuff going on. So we had a walk at Heartwood Acres. We've had a couple art classes. We had a sustainability class, and we've had 2 walks. Yeah. Sorry, I forgot. Is that better? Thank you.
So excited.
Yeah, just jumped right into it. So yeah, share some pictures from that. So here's the crew from the Heartwood Acres walk. Very cold day. This only meet on cold day. We can't control the weather. So yeah, here's the first art class, and these were taught by Kate Pavel. This was a mushroom cultivation class with Espo from the PA Mushroom Company that was hosted by the Allegheny Land Trust. And we had another art class, a walk at Wolf Creek Narrows, which is about an hour north of here. And February 26th, we were finding scarlet cups. So they were out early this year. And on March 4th, I led a lichen walk with Kara at Hillman State Park. We found some really cool stuff there. It's a beautiful place if you've never been. All right, in terms of upcoming walks and events, we don't have a whole lot scheduled in the next month or so, but in April, that's when morel season really picks up. So we'll be hosting more walks. This is what we have on the calendar so far, but some of our walk leaders will probably announce stuff if things warm up a little bit early in April. But yeah, so Dark Hollow Woods, that's with Cecily Franklin, and that's also with the Oakmont Garden Club, and that's the start of the City Nature Challenge. So any of the finds that you observe can count towards that. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a sec. On May 6th, we're hosting 2 walks in the same day. One is going to be kind of to the east of Pittsburgh, and the other is going to be more to the west and south, right? So we've got Pine Ridge Lodge. We pretty much always host a walk there the first weekend in May to look for morels. And it's also a great time to go to Raccoon Creek, not only for the mushrooms, but for the incredible wildflower reserve there. If you haven't been in late April, early May, it's a beautiful walk. Highly recommend it. And then June 4th, we'll be at the Phipps Bio Blitz in Shenley Park. We have a bunch of stuff scheduled for later in the year, but I don't plan my life that far ahead, so we'll get to that later. Upcoming events here with the Parks Conservancy. I'm not hosting a walk in Frick Park in April. Instead, I'm hosting it in McKinley Park, which is kind of in the south side slopes of town. So yeah, we'll be meeting there at noon. It's free, but make sure you register in advance. And there's going to be a whole bunch of family-friendly activities happening that day from noon to 3. So if you have little ones or know someone who does, bring them out to the park. You can join for a mushroom walk and enjoy some family activities. Yeah. Okay. Hey, Jared, can you check on that? Thank you. Yes, Leslie. All right, 4 slots left. Get them while they're hot, I guess. But yeah, I'll be leading that walk. And there's some walks coming up with Allegheny Land Trust. Those are also mostly sold out. So April 28th at Audubon Greenway, May 19th at Devil's Hollow, and June 2nd at Barking Slopes. So I think keep an eye on those as it gets closer to the date. You know, people might cancel, new tickets might appear. So don't lose hope. Keep your eyes on ALT's website close to those dates. All right, City Nature Challenge. I wanted to share a few things about that. It happens every year, usually like the last weekend in April, first weekend in May, somewhere around there. And Pittsburgh participates. A bunch of our rival East Coast cities participate as well. Cleveland, Baltimore, you know, Philly. And I hate to admit it, but they usually beat us. So we need more people to get out there, get on iNaturalist and take pictures of all the stuff you see outside. It can be fungi, plants, animals, other things. But yeah, it's a global virtual BioBlitz. So you can participate in any of the counties that touch Allegheny County. So if you take pictures, upload it to iNaturalist, it'll count towards Pittsburgh stats in this fun little challenge. Yeah. Any questions about that? Cool. All right, here's our meeting schedule for the year. This meeting is a little unusual in that it's happening the second Tuesday of the month. Typically, we host them the third Tuesday of the month. So there's the dates and our speakers and topics. We're really excited about all the folks that we're bringing here this year. Also, a little different this year, we're hosting Mushroom Education Day later on June 10th, and it'll be at Powder Mill Nature Reserve in Westmoreland County. We're really excited to have it in a beautiful location with lots of hiking trails. So keep your eyes posted on our website for some updates on that. We haven't set the price or open registration yet, so we'll get that figured out soon and get it up on the website. But generally, the schedule is going to be classes in the morning, a free walk in the afternoon. So keep June 10th on your calendar. And another save the date would be September 29th and 30th. We'll be hosting our annual Linkhoff Memorial Foray. So the 29th is a Friday. We'll be in Cook Forest. That one is free. The main event on Saturday requires registration, and we'll have mushroom walks in the morning. We'll have speakers in the afternoon. We'll have a mushroom feast, auction, live music, vendors, all kinds of fun stuff. So if you can make it out to North Park on Saturday, September 30th, it's a really great event, especially if you want to learn more about the abundance of mushrooms that are appearing in that kind of late summer, early fall time of year. We're really, really excited about our speakers this year. We're bringing in Noah Siegel. He's a co-author of Mushrooms of the Redwood Coast, has published a lot of other things, a great photographer. And we're bringing in Barry Overton from the eastern part of the state. He's a researcher who studies white nose syndrome in bats and a couple other different fungal things. So yeah, we're stoked to be bringing them out. Here's our membership report. As of yesterday, we had 403 members. So congratulations. Thank you for your support. We appreciate it. Yeah, hopefully we can keep that up. Yay. Yeah. So thank you so much. If you joined our club, if you didn't, no worries. We appreciate you being here anyway. But there are some benefits from joining the club. So you, well, I forgot to update this one. Dang. So we're not live on Zoom anymore. This is from last year, but you can enter our annual photo contest and you'll get updates on mushroom walks and events. You'll get a discount on your foray registration. And if you can make it to our cultivation meeting in May, you'll get a free mushroom grow kit. You'll get an oyster mushroom kit and you can bring a log to inoculate with shiitake spawn. So that alone is worth the value of a membership, in my opinion. So if you're into growing your own mushrooms and you can be here in May, highly recommend you join the club and support what we're doing. We updated the look of our buttons. So if you've been here in the past, you might know about our button ID program. So we award these to folks who submit lists of the mushroom species that they confidently know how to identify. We really appreciate when people give us like an INAT list that'll link us to all your observations so we can go and check and see like, okay, are these the species that you're observing? And we kind of vet that and award people when they've reached different levels of expertise. So let's see, I don't think we've awarded several since our last meeting, but Julie's not here tonight. She's the button chair. So hopefully y'all got them in the mail and we'll award some next month. But congratulations to all these folks. Let's give them a round of applause for their hard work. Any of you here tonight? Raise your hand. Any of these award recipients here? Ah, dang. All right.
Is there a button big enough for John Fish? Like 7 figures. How cool is
Yeah.
this?
We have to make a special one just for him. All right, some other news we wanted to announce. We're really excited to have Sierra Weir as our new scholarship chair. And we've already awarded one scholarship, someone who applied late last year, Daniel. And Daniel is a student of Barry, who we're bringing out for the foray this year. So we're hoping maybe they can get a group of students to come along and come explore Western Pennsylvania. So thanks, Sierra, for volunteering in that role. If you don't know about our scholarship program, we set aside some funds to support anyone who's doing something mushroom related. Most of our recipients are researchers who are advancing the field in some capacity. But you know, depending on your idea, you can look at our scholarship page on our website and apply. We're open to any ideas you have of ways you could use those funds to support something mycology related and share what you've learned here with the rest of us. So get in touch if you have an idea. Also wanted to update you on our annual photo contest. The deadline's going to be the end of September. You can submit up to 5 entries and no limit on the resolution anymore. And yeah, just send those to pamushroomclubphotos@gmail.com and enter, make sure you label them with your name and the category that you want to enter them in. There's a bunch of different categories for the mushroom contest. A new category this year is mushroom selfies. So if you into that, you want to submit a mushroom selfie, it'll be judged against others. You could be the winning mushroom selfie of the year. All right, next month's meeting, we're our guest is going to be joining us via Zoom next month. We'll still be here in person, and we were thinking of hosting a walk here before the meeting. So if you can get here at 5:30 and you want to go for a little walk beforehand to kind of help balance out not having a speaker here in person, we'll go for a walk, bring back what we found, identify it at tables in the back. So you'll get a chance to, hold these mushrooms in the hand alongside experts who will answer any questions that you might have. Lamont will be back there helping identify whatever you bring in and answering your questions along with a lot of our other expert mushroom identifiers. So that's a normal feature of our meetings that doesn't really apply when there's snow on the ground. Kind of hard to find mushrooms right now. But yeah, so Django will be joining us from Tennessee. Django is a PhD student at Knoxville, University of Tennessee, and will be presenting on tiny mushrooms. So talking about microscopy and all things little. Any other announcements or questions before I introduce tonight's speaker? Is there anything I missed? Yeah. Yeah, so this is being live streamed to our Facebook page, I think. Are we good, Jared? All right. And we usually upload at least these slides to our website afterwards. We don't always share the speaker slides because we don't always have permission to do that. But yeah, so anything in here that you want more info on, slides should be on the website. You can always reach out to me or other folks in the club. Our emails are all on the website as well if you have questions. Yeah. So I'm gonna get special permission from the park rangers and from the city for walks that the club is hosting here. I usually do that for any of the city parks. Technically, it's not legal to pick mushrooms in city parks in Pittsburgh, but the city's pretty willing to work with us as long as we reach out, let them know in advance. It's not so much to stop people from learning, it's to stop people from doing like commercial harvesting in the city parks. A lot of people will come and pick things and sell them, and they don't want that to be happening. We want to preserve what's here for everyone to enjoy. Any other questions? All right. Whew. Okay, so we're really excited to introduce tonight's speaker. Tonight we have Britt Bunyard joining us, and he is the founder, publisher, and editor-in-chief of the mycology journal Fungi. Britt has worked academically as a mycologist his entire career, teaching a number of university courses and writing scientifically for many research journals and popular science magazines. He has served as an editor for mycological and entomological research journals, as well as mushroom guide books. Britt also serves as executive director of the Telluride Mushroom Festival. A popular evangelizer of all things fungal, Britt has been featured on NPR's All Things Considered, PBS's Nova, Wisconsin foodie television programs, and interviewed or quoted in Discover Magazine, The Atlantic, Vox, Vogue, Forbes, etc. Many magazines and newspapers. He has authored or co-authored several books, including Amanitas of North America, The Beginner's Guide to Mushrooms, Mushrooms and Macrofungi of Ohio and Midwestern states, and most recently, The Lives of Fungi. In 2021, Britt was awarded the Gary Linkoff Award for contributions to amateur mycology by the North American Mycological Association, and that's NAMA's most prestigious honor for American mycologists. So without further ado, I give you Britt Bunyard. This will I'll share slides on the screen. We'll plug you in here. And you'll have to open up the folder.
So everyone can hear me okay if I just talk in my normal voice, right? Do I need a microphone or?
We have a mic on the camera here.
So and while we're waiting, there are 3 copies of FUNGI Magazine in the back. Help yourself to those. The books that are sitting around are sale afterwards that I can sign, and the price is listed there. They're at a deep discount. You have a lot of money, you know, you're burdened with all the money in your pockets and you want to move money. And I can take credit cards as well. If your credit cards are getting rusty, we'll pull those out. So the whole slideshow tonight will take probably about 60 or 65 minutes. So that's about the right amount of time for you to nap. You'll love it. There'll be a lot of pretty pictures. Are there a lot of total newbies here, beginners? Hopefully, yes. Oh, great. I hate it when people are shy because I know the beginners. So this will be definitely for beginners, and there'll be a lot of pretty pictures, nothing too technical, but it'll introduce a group of mushrooms that for sure you see every year, and you might be intimidated because there's lots and lots of Amanitas species, but turns out it's actually pretty easy to kind of figure out which ones you have in the area. Plus, it's the prettiest group of mushrooms, so you want to know what they are. It's also the most notorious group for poisoning and killing people. So most guidebooks, most mushroom guidebooks say that's the group you should start with if you plan on eating stuff, just so you don't get into trouble. Oh, I need a mic, then I need a mic.
Yeah.
Sure. It's okay, you can hear me. Okay. Try not to talk extra loud since I know powered up. But also maybe. Just stay with one. You have to stay in one spot.
Thank you.
Still good? Oh, you don't. So, yeah, actually, it would actually be better if we see when I can stand right to the side. Hopefully, have a slide with answer. So then use the computer, you don't need the computer. Yeah. You might stand in the right spot because I. Okay.
Yeah.
We all set? Everyone can hear me now? Great. And so I guess someone's keeping watch of people online if they have some sort of problem. At least I can't see the screen.
Yeah.
Okay, so on with the show. So as I said, this should take maybe 60 minutes, 65 minutes, something like that. It'll be a lot of pictures from the book that my co-author Jay Justice and I authored. It came out just a couple years ago. I'm not actually a taxonomist. I study insects in particular flies that are still involved with mushrooms. So if you are collecting mushrooms for the table and you get these beautiful bolets and things home and open them up and you see maggots inside of them, people call them worms, but they're maggots. That's the type of stuff I study. So my very little secret is out now. And then I've studied mushroom flies, and these are flies that feed only on mushrooms. I've studied mushroom flies for over 35 years since I was a student. And at one point, after rearing to adulthood every type of fly from pretty much every type of mushroom. I decided to focus on one specific group of mushrooms just to see if I could find any sorts of differences of different groups of flies, different anatomy, taxonomy, something like that. So I was pondering which group of mushrooms maybe to study and hit upon Amanitas. And the reason is because there's quite a bunch of different types of morphology. Some are slimy, some are kind of furry and have different structures on the outside. Some of them are deadly poisonous to animals. Some obviously are completely safe to eat for animals. So I thought this might be a good group to look at to see if there's differences in species of flies. The trick is I was going to have to learn, because I know fly taxonomy really, really well. And I mean, I know mushroom taxonomy pretty well, but I had to basically learn all the species of Amanitas of North America. So for that, I had to go into the tutelage of a colleague. So I'm not sure why it's not advancing. Is the Zoom maybe messing up my side advancer? Because the light's coming on the advancer right at the button, but it's not. So what'd you do?
It was just not focused on that.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know anything about it. I never did that. So yeah, I had to learn taxonomy, and my colleague Jay Justice, I'll show you a picture of him in a second, got very familiar with all of the species. And so after years and years of working on Amanitas with Jay, we decided to put together a book because there really wasn't any modern book that has all the species of Amanitas. So the book I have here in the back, if you don't have a copy, you can pick one up. But then in the meantime, pandemic hit and there was lockdown, so then I actually came out with a few more books. The Amanita book took us 8 years to write. This one here didn't take nearly so long because again, I was homebound. I don't have any copies of this one here other than the one show copy. This one just came out last year, and actually most of the other lecture stops that I was doing before arriving here were based on this book. There is one copy for show, and Cecily had put in the newsletter that you could pick up a copy with a discount code. So if you bought one of those and brought it, I'm happy to sign that. If you don't have one, you can pick them up at bookstores as well as Amazon and wherever. But if you go to the publisher, Princeton University Press, you can enter this discount code BUN30 and get 30% off. So, you know, why not? The book's not terribly expensive to begin with, but with the discount, it's a good deal. If you're the type that takes pictures of these QR codes to find out more, that's there. And so this is my colleague, Jay Justice. I'm sure you've seen him around at NAMA forays as well as forays by this club. He's in the Arkansas club, but he's an Amanita guru. He's also a bowling guru and pretty much knows all the mushrooms of Eastern North America. So we haven't had him booked to do a lecture in a while. It'd be a good time to bring him up. Some other gurus that have taught me the aforementioned Noah Siegel pictured here, and then the world's authority, certainly the North American authority on Amanitas, is the fellow on the left, Rod Tullis. He's in Princeton, New Jersey. And this is the type of thing you'll see at club forays and NAMA forays. You know, these really super smart brainiacs get together and are discussing things. And plus, I'm sometimes there too. So you can see what we're thinking about. So Rod Tullis, you know, he's changing the names on the Amanitas, and as it was mentioned, Noah's really great at taking photos. I'm usually sort of more focused on other things. Anyways, and then one final other guru that I have to thank for where I am today is Gary Witkoff, the greatest mycologist of my lifetime. When I was a kid in middle school, he was my hero. I had his Audubon guide to mushrooms and was already enamored with the guy. And then amazingly, decades later, I grew up and become a mycologist and would do events with Gary all the time. You know, what other profession or sport or career did you have a situation like that where the kid could grow up and then actually, you know, play on the same team? And just a couple of days ago, I was back at his house dropping off some stuff, and he passed away a few years ago. But this was the first time I got to see Gary Witkoff play in Manhattan. It's how famous the guy was. They don't just give street names to people in New York City because there's only so many streets. Okay, so on with the show. So tonight's performance, we'll look at Amanitas of the northern part of the Midwest, and that includes this region as well. So you'll see pictures of Amanitas that you should for sure know and recognize, and even if you don't, be on the lookout this year when you're flooring. And there'll be some basics on how to know them, lookalikes, morphology, a bit about their toxins, etc. And first and foremost, with all the mushroom names, but especially Amanitas, there's a sort of a disagreement about how to pronounce it. Most of the time I say Amanitas. If I'm with a club that everybody seems to say Amanita, I'll sort of modify. So what's this club say? John, what do you say? He's gonna be the one. So anyways, some clubs have a lot of sort of infighting about how the name should be pronounced. But I'm here to tell you, both are totally fine. Really, neither one is really the correct way to say it if you talk to the Italians. But in any case, I thought I'd show this as kind of a nice little icebreaker, just to say, you know, we can get along with these things. Plus, it's Oscar season. We just had the Oscars, so this was fresh in my mind. So no matter what you call Amanitas or Amanitas or Amanitas, etc., one thing's for sure, we won't argue about their beauty. Whenever you see Amanitas in the forest, a lot of different colorful mushrooms. Some are pure white. A lot of them are quite large and sizable. And whenever people see Amanitas, they usually get pretty excited. The ones with the red patch, the red mushrooms with the white patches, of course, thrill people. Not a lot of the big Caesars get people excited. If you go to any wild mushroom fair or festival, you know, they have the mushrooms laid out and identified. For sure, there's always lots of Amanitas, and especially in this areas. There's parades around the world for mushrooms. Of course, the theme is always Amanitas. And in Telluride, at the famous mushroom parade, almost everybody dresses like Wisteria. They'll dress like other Amanitas too, though, because the pressure is really on costumes. This is from years ago. Now the costumes are so elaborate, it's unbelievable because there's such amazing prizes. But people dress up like all kinds of different mushrooms. I really like this one here because it was the local Sun Caesar Amanita that occurs in the Four Corners. But she even had a little baby Amanita there. All were quite morphologically correct. So I think it's pretty good. Okay, so when you're in the woods, you'll see lots of Amanitas for sure this season. You'll also see stuff that are lookalikes. All the groups of mushrooms have lookalikes. If you are the type of person that collects mushrooms for the table, you definitely have to know about lookalikes because you don't want to get in trouble. People absolutely get poisoned every year, and in fact, even deaths occur just about every year due to Amanita poisoning. So one mushroom that you're going to be seeing pretty soon coming out does have quite a resemblance to Amanitas. And it's this guy here, the deer mushroom or fawn mushroom, Plutus cervinus. It's probably a group of mushrooms that are hard to tell one from another, but they have somewhat of a resemblance to Amanitas. The stalk actually looks quite Amanita-like to me, and the way the gills on the cap are quite Amanita-like to me as well. There's a couple big differences about Plutus species, why you would not confuse it with an Amanita. And what are those? Growing on wood. What else?
Pink spores.
Pink spores, yeah. So those are the two biggies. If you're a beginner in the group, already you've learned something really important. Don't necessarily just go by what the mushroom looks like. Take note of how it's growing, what the substrate is, and also spore color. You don't always know the spore color from seeing the mushroom, but if you bring the mushroom back and set it on white paper, and some books even say different color paper. I use white paper for all mushrooms because white and off-white and cream color mushrooms, you'll see those differences maybe a little better on white paper than you would on black. They'll all look like white spore on white paper. So I just use regular white paper for everything, or foil. Anyway, so yeah, this would have pink spores. Amanitas do not. They have white spores, and this is on wood. But otherwise, it looks kind of like an Amanita. This one looks even more like an Amanita, and it's a close relative of that last one. This one has another structure that makes it look Amanita-like. It's growing on wood, but also has a big saccade, and many Amanitas do that. This one also has pink. It's in the same family as that previous one. This is Bulgariella. And this one, if you've ever seen this mushroom book, most books call it a good edible. It's not. It's not a very good edible at all that common. So whenever I see it, I never pick it. It's just frankly too pretty to pick.
the top of the cap is kind of silky, and that's in fact where the name comes from. Amanitas means silky. So one more in this particular group of pink spored mushrooms. This is a fairly new genus that's been erected to go in between the two, Bulbariella, and it's Volvopluteus gliocephalus. And this one's silky and furry. This one's actually kind of sticky and almost slimy on top, and that's where it gets the name gliocephalus, which means kind of gluey. But anyways, this one's in that same group. Notice this really mature one on the right has pink spores. You wouldn't mistake it for an Amanita. And again, Amanitas have white spores. But look at all the other ones to the left of it, including that little egg. You would swear it was an Amanita. In fact, everyone in the Wisconsin Mycological Society that I've been a member of for years swore this was an Amanita as well. We would have the annual summer picnic at my farm, and as great luck would have it, in the mulch, and thankfully it was beneath a tree, it was beneath a birch tree. This mushroom had nothing to do with the birch tree, it's not mycorrhizal. But thankfully it was beneath the birch tree because that helped me in tricking literally everyone, including the experts in the club. Everyone arrives for the picnic, they come past this mulch. I had spirited away this mature one here, by the way. And so these guys were sticking up growing, and everyone's marveling at this destroying angel, and why is it occurring with this birch tree, and which species is it? And at first glance, it does look like a destroying angel, right? A deadly Amanita. There's something really important that this guy is missing, though. Yeah, no ring. There's a lot of Amanitas that have a ring, but none of the deadly destroying angels should be missing a ring. So otherwise, you had a little baby egg, it has a psychic bulb and everything. So of course, when I reunited the adult with the others, then everyone's like, oh, it's a pink sport Amanita. Wait a minute, what's that? So I did a formal no. This is a Volvopluteus. A couple of the older people in the group, they actually did recognize this question because they knew this was a pretty common thing in farmland a long, long time ago. But now it's not commonly seen in the Midwest so much. Anyways, the reason these three mushrooms I just showed you look like Amanitas is this, and this is the only phylogenetic tree you're going to see, by the way. You know how a lot of people show a lot of phylogenetic trees? I don't, because nobody likes to see this. I like to see real trees with leaves. But anyways, if you look at this phylogenetic tree, here's what you'll see. A long, long time ago, when Ascomycetes and Basidiomycetes split from a common ancestor, it was about 550 million years ago, a long time ago. Then you started getting more into the primitive Basidiomycetes like chanterelles and polypores and russulas. They're pretty ancient. It wasn't until maybe 100 million years ago that the modern agaric type mushrooms came on the scene. So all these guys here are much more modern, maybe about 100 million years ago. One of the big groups in here, you'll see, is the Amanitaceae, the family of Amanitas. And on this same branch is Pluteus types and Pleurotus types. So they're all very, very closely related, and that's why they look really similar. I know what you're saying. Wait a minute, those Pluteaceae species are decomposers, and Amanitas are mycorrhizals. Well, the most primitive Amanitas, it turns out, actually are free living and rot things. And it seems, based on some fairly recent studies, that all the more modern Amanitas, all the mycorrhizal types, came from them. So, anyways, in looking, backing up, if you take this little branch here and then blow it up into the next scene, what we see is the Amanitaceae and the Pluteaceae are basically kin folks and come from a common ancestor, and whereby this branch shows Pluteus, Volvopluteus, Bulbariella, the ones I just showed. This other side here shows the species in the Amanitaceae, which includes the genus Amanita, and then this other genus Lamicella, which is kind of a small group of a few kind of slimy Amanita-like guys that aren't all that commonly seen. Anyways, the gist of tonight's show, we'll be looking at how to know these different groups of Amanitas. There's even more recent taxonomic schemes that are even kind of trying to tease some of these apart. I won't go into that because that's not the way the book is laid out, but I can tell you there's been lots of other taxonomic schemes down through the ages. The ringless Amanitas have been their own genus, and some of the other groups have been their own genera as well. So some of these taxonomic schemes come and go, and I'm not really certain these new ideas are going to stick either. Anyways, this is, I think, a little bit easier to make sense of. Okay, so one really neat thing about Amanitas, and one of the reasons why I wanted to work with them when rearing mushroom flies, is because there's so many different types. And at first glance, it's pretty easy to tell one from another. You don't necessarily know which species is which here, but you can tell one is not the same as the other, right? This picture was taken at a club foray, I think in Missouri several years ago. After like 5 minutes in the woods, there's all kinds of different amanitas of different colors and shapes, etc. And that's pretty exciting. You don't have to know a lot about taxonomy, about morphology. You don't even need a microscope to figure out all the amanitas. You can't do that with Galerina and a lot of other genera. You have to have a microscope, etc. So anyways, one thing that's really nice about them, most of the species are really big and have all sorts of structures, as seen here. This image is from Tom Volk's website that shows what a saccate bulb is, stalk, ring, gills, all this sort of stuff. That's what they're called. Then there's a couple other things to know about Amanita morphology. When they start out as a little baby mushroom, well, people call that an egg. It's covered by a sheath called a universal veil, and then the gills are covered by what's called a partial veil that covers the gills. So when both of those structures break and the stem elongates, the cap opens, parts are left at the bottom of the mushroom and the top of the mushroom and on the stalk, and that also helps with identification. One other thing is you can see in this cross section, amanitas can be hollow, as shown here. This is a Caesar type amanita. They have a hollow stem, others have a solid stem. So there's a whole bunch of things you can see on the mushroom and be able to know one from the other. It's a really big group of mushrooms, probably 400 species, maybe total in North America, probably 200, 225 that are maybe commonly seen. That's a lot of species, but you can pretty easily figure things out, especially if you find my book. That's all kinds of handy ways to do it. So shameless ad. So here's how amanitas are defined. All of them have this universal veil, this cover over the mushroom, and they have a partial veil. The thing is, when you find some species, there doesn't seem to be any remnants of a universal veil. It's there by definition. They all have a universal veil. It's just it may end up in the mature specimen as just little pieces of dust or fragments on the mushroom. They have 3 gills, therefore the cap comes away clean from the stalk. They all have a white spore print. They typically have white gills. However, sometimes the gills are yellow color in the cases of the Caesars, but they're not going to be brown or pink or anything like that. Many have a ring, but not all. There's that ringless group, and you'll see some of them later on. And that's pretty much all of the notes there. Again, definitely don't need a microscope to know one amanita from another. But here's one thing you do have to know. So a lot of mushrooms, when you approach them in the woods, and this is really good to know for a beginner, but actually this is probably just as good to know even if you're an expert. When you approach mushrooms in the woods and look down upon them, you can possibly make an ID from that. Turns out amanitas, at least to know one species from another, the most important part is not the cap. Believe it or not, it's actually the bottom of the stem. So when you're collecting amanitas, you really should dig the entire mushroom up and get a little bit of dirt on the bottom. And frankly, that's good at a foray where things are going to be put on a display table for everyone's education. That's a good idea with everything. That way everyone knows what the substrate was, if it was on rotten wood or in a mulchy situation or a lawn, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, if these mushrooms here were sliced off and the cap and some of the stalk brought in, you really wouldn't know one from another, and certainly some of them would look like other amanitas. But look how dissimilar the bases of the stalk are. Some can have a big, giant, honking, boot-like saccate vulva, like the one on the left. They can have a great, big, giant, buried sort of bulbous part of the stem, which is pretty cool to see. And then in other cases, they could have anything in between. The universal veil, maybe it's just rings of scales, like Amanita muscaria or Augusta, or there could be part of a vulva, but it's not really membranous, so parts of it have kind of broken up and flaked off. Anyways, you really need to get the entire stem, including the bottom of the stalk. And so why do they have these sorts of structures? Why do they have a bulbous base on the stalk? Why do they have patches or flecks or like a smear of material on the top of the cap? This is why. It all has to do with how the mushroom develops. And this is these little cartoons here are really, really nice and handy. They're in the book, and they came from Jeffrey Kibbe, who runs the Field Mycology Journal. in Britain, which is sort of, I sort of consider it to be like the sister magazine to the FUNGI Magazine. And Jeffrey Tibby has authored a number of books. In fact, he just had one that came out this week. He's real famous over in Britain. Anyways, what these color-coded little cartoons show is, like in the case of something like Amanita Hysteria, starts out as a little A. They all start out as a little A. And then as the stem elongates, in this case, it elongates sort of on the top of the basal bulb of the mushroom. So it leaves a lot of the stem behind. So when the mushroom matures, you have this big fat base. Most of the elongation came here on the top. In some cases, it's a little more symmetric, like this vaginata type, whereby pretty much the whole stalk elongates. You don't end up with a bulbous space at the bottom. The universal veil that covers the entire little baby mushroom. You see how when the mushroom matures, this material breaks and leaves scales on the top, like in the fly agaric. It also leaves pieces of that velar material on the basal bulb, and that's how you get those sort of rings of material on the bulb. And those will often be a different color than the rest of the stem, because this universal veil, in the case maybe of the skirt, was yellow, but the mushroom underneath is red. Or maybe it's white, and the mushroom underneath is red. So that's why these scales are a different color. And, oh yeah, so where the cap is sort of scrunched over and attached to the stalk, there's this little layer in between, and when the cap opens, this material tears free, and then leaves this ring in the stalk. So, and you can see this with all these different groups are shown here. The one thing to take note of, and I'll repeat it when I get to this group in just a few minutes, but the vaginata group, things like the grisettes, are up in the top right. One thing to point out, all the books always mention that there's no partial veil with the vaginata type mushrooms. This is actually wrong. There's no ring, but there's a partial veil. It's just in the case of these guys, the partial veil, again, this material here, when the cap pops open, this doesn't pop off the side and leave a ring. The partial veil material is stuck all along the side of the stalk. There's a partial veil with them, but no ring. And in this case, these mushrooms often have really beautiful stalks. So, and I'll show you some pictures. It's one of my favorite groups to see. They're very kind of long and more elegant and graceful. And often the cap is kind of boring, like a brown or a white or a tan color. And all the action is on the stalk. There would be like orange chevrons of material or other colors there that show up really, really pretty. Okay, so we'll see more pretty pictures. In a nutshell, this is the 7 different sections of the genus Amanita. And it's quickly kind of split up based on a couple different features that are really easy to see. So the genus Amanita is split up into 2 subgenera, the subgenus Amanita, which includes these 3 sections. Section Amanita, the top left there, which includes things like the fly agaric, the panthers, the gematoid type Amanitas, real common groups of mushrooms. It also includes the Caesar Amanitas, which are really quite pretty and very famous edible mushrooms over a lot of the northern hemisphere. And it includes the vaginata type, the grisettes. And these are also edibles that are collected sometimes. These are the ones that don't have a ring on the stalk, but they do have a saccate vulva, much like these. The other subgenus Lepidella, includes things like species of Lepidellas. Most of these are white in color and kind of shaggy. They can be massive, super giant mushrooms, sometimes with big, deep rooting stalks. Pretty much all of them are pure white, but in some ways they're the prettiest ones because of the shaggy material, these big giant roots. I really like to see them. There's quite a few species of them around here, and especially down in the deep south. Section you need to know is for sure section Phalloideae. It's a very small group with not very many species, but all of them should be considered deadly poisonous. Around here, all the species are pure white. I'll show you how to kind of tell one from another. And then this other group here, the section Baelidae, is kind of a grab bag of mushrooms that includes some colorful ones and some drab ones. And we'll actually start the show with seeing some pictures of that. Anyways, one other thing to note, you saw this picture a few seconds ago, but you probably didn't pay attention to one more feature to look at when collecting your Amanitas. So I said the cap isn't really all that important. There is one thing to note. Note on the cap whether it has a striate cap margin or not. See these ridges here? Those are called striations on the cap. This guy doesn't have it, this guy doesn't have it, this guy does have it. This guy, it's most easily seen here. So those 2 subgenera I mentioned, they're divided phylogenetically, but it's also based on whether or not their spores stay a color or not in Melzer's reagent. If you don't have Melzer's reagent, no worries. The two subgenera are also divided by whether they have striations on the cap. The striations are formed because the cap is quite thin, and so you can actually see where the gills are attached to the cap. It's sort of like ribs on an umbrella that forms these striations. This isn't foolproof because even non-striate caps can kind of look like they're striate in dry weather and the cap starts drying down. So, you know, before you put anything in your mouth, of course, you'd want to see a number of different specimens just to make sure you know what you're doing. But that goes the same for if you're just making an ID. You want to, you know, make a good ID is based on a good representation of a number of specimens. So anyways, that's one more thing to be watching for. And so this striation or not comes into play when you're cleaning stuff out. This came from David Aurora's Mushrooms Demystified book, Works Like a Charm. So you find something that you're for sure is an Amanita, take a look at it. Is it amyloid or inamyloid? You can base that again on whether or not the cap has striations or not. If there's striations on the cap, you go to the left. It's one of those three sections. If it has a big bulbous base, amyloid patches on the top, it's going to be section Amanita, which includes flagaric and panthenoid and gemma types. Bulbous base, if it does not have a bulbous base, then it's going to be the grisettes or the Caesars, and that's going to be delineated by whether or not they have a range of stalk. Pretty easy. It's back up here at the top. If the cap is not striate, then it's one of these four sections. And that's determined by whether or not the margin of the cap is appendiculate, means is there material hanging down from it or not, whether there's a saccate vulva, etc. So like not appendiculate, if it has a saccate vulva, it's staloidy. If it does not, then it's velidae, etc. So pretty simple. And I'll show you examples of it. So basically, Amanita ID really is as simple as 1, 2, 3. So, yeah. All the books always start out with, most guidebooks start out with Amanitas or Lepiotas, you know, white sword mushrooms. And then the Amanita section usually starts out with the Muscarioid types. So, and my book is like that too, but we're not going to do that today. Around here, there's a number of species in this section. So let's just start out here. A lot of people shy away from the brunescens types, which are the false step caps, and the lavindula types. So we're just going to start there because these are ones you should know. They're actually pretty easy to work with, believe it or not. So some things to look for: species in this section, velidae, again, the blushers, false step caps, and yellow patches. Things to look for is there blushing on the mushroom, especially on the stalk, and especially on the base of the stalk. Kind of these reddish colors. The blushers for sure, they show blushing color, blushing red color on the cap, stalk, base of the stalk, everything. You look at it and they have blushing. But most of the other ones in this group also do it to some extent, but you may have to look close. So this is the species Amanita brunescens. It's the browning type of Amanita. So it has a blushing on the stalk. And another thing to notice is how much of a basal bulb the bottom of the stalk has, and is it chiseled or not, or some books call it cleft. So this shows all of those things. It shows the bruising, and you can see these have these clefts. It looks like someone chiseled chunks into the stalk. It's very noticeable. And this is a super common species around here. It can be with a number of different host trees, including even hemlocks in a lot of places. So, you know, obviously we're in hemlock country here. So we'll start with this one because this is actually my favorite one of the group, Amanita porphyria. This species occurs all across North America and Europe. And every year, Barb's here somewhere. Every year we go to Italy and look for mushrooms, and this is a common one we see. This specimen here is quite brown. It can be kind of a brown purple color, quite pretty. Has this big basal bulb that can be chiseled. See the arrow there. But another thing about it to watch for, that's the main character to set this one apart from all the other Amanitas, is the ring on the stalk, which will be gray, which is a very unusual color for a ring on Amanitas. And the ring on this guy is usually quite big and dramatic. So the common name is even called the ball gown Amanita. So this one's pretty big, doesn't even do it justice. Sometimes it can be bigger than that in this green color. The stalk can be quite white color, but it can also have quite a bit of kind of gray or even purple. It's a very pretty mushroom to see and occurs with a number of different types of host trees. Obviously conifers, they're in the picture here. Another one super common in the fall around here, actually probably late summer through fall, is this guy here, Amanita flavotonia, the so-called yellow patches. It can be one of the most common mushrooms out a lot of times. And they don't get terribly big, sometimes just a few inches tall, but very numerous. They'll be quite yellow to yellow-orange on the cap, with bright lemon yellow flecks on the cap stalk and the basal bulb, like dust. Some books even call it like the yellow dust Amanita. I showed this mushroom because it's super common. You for sure will see it this year, and it gets mistaken for Amanita frostiana quite a bit, which looks almost exactly like it. Super easy to tell them apart. This guy is in subgenus Lepidella, therefore does not have a striated cap margin. Frostiana is in subgenus Amanita, it has a striated cap margin, is not nearly so common. The orange on it sometimes is more orange, but don't use that as the indicator. Just look for the striated cap margin. If you see one of this species, you'll see dozens. So you'll for sure know whether or not it should have a stripe. So the arrow, yeah, the arrows are pointing to those stripe. Super common little mushroom, very colorful. And again, it's often really it's often tenuous for a lot of people to ID this one, but it doesn't need to be because it's so common. And this is another super common one in pretty much right on fall, on into like very late fall, Amanita lavindula. Older books will call this Amanita citrina or Amanita citrina, variety lavindula. Rob Tullis has mentioned that it can develop these lavender tones in the presence of cold weather, like maybe frost at night or whatever. However, I've collected it numerous times in parts of the country that it cannot freeze, it cannot frost. So I think it just does this color on its own. And it's not always so lavender as other times. This shows it off pretty well. So this guy over here is still known as the so-called true Amanita citrina, the citron yellow Amanita. Besides the cap, the ring on it is also quite a pretty citron yellow color, and doesn't get quite the lavender tones as our species over here. Anyways, another super common mushroom. Another characteristic about this guy is the odor. Odors are important with a lot of different types of mushrooms. Amanitas, not so much. The Lepidellas all kind of have a foul smell, like stale or freezer burned meat. Some can be chlorine smell. A lot of Amanitas don't really have, honestly, a very important smell. This guy for sure does, and a few others in this group do. Anyone recall what the smell of this guy should be? Potatoes. This one will have a kind of potato smell. The brunescens will have a potato smell as well. So anyways, again, this can be a fairly confusing mushroom, but there's a number of different characters that can help you get to an ID. Notice it also has that kind of a blushing color. Basal bulb is chiseled. Sometimes you'll get almost looks like it wants to make kind of a saccate vulva. So this is one of the mushrooms that people will sometimes call a false death cap because it kind of looks like that. And then look at that super pretty citron yellow ring. So it's a pretty striking mushroom to see. They almost glow in the dark. They're such a striking citron yellow. Okay, so that last group included some of these so-called false death caps. This group will include the true death caps, and this is the most notorious group of mushrooms. Nearly all mushroom deaths worldwide come from just a few species in this one group. Small group, but they make a big impact. So this is section Phalloideae, and this dramatic photo that everyone kind of winced at is in the book. This was given to me to put in the book by Noah Siegel. So it was mentioned before how he takes beautiful photos. Yeah, this is one. So just to recall how the development of baby Amanitas into big Amanitas leads to these different structures that we'll be looking for to make our IDs. So in the case of section Phalloideae, there's really no basal bulb. The stem is pretty centric in its elongation. The universal veil is quite thick and membranous, and when it breaks, it leaves behind a lot of material. as a saccate vulva, and you might have maybe a single piece of the universal veil remaining on the cap. And a lot of times people will call that single patch of skull. So start out with Amanita phalloides. Most books state that with one of the identifying characteristics is there's usually no skull cap on phalloides. I actually see it fairly routinely, and obviously these guys have a single patch on the top, a skull cap. These are from San Francisco Bay Area of California. And most books pointing out identification of Amanita phalloides will say, you know, when it comes out and the color, usually kind of a yellow-green color. That's not super helpful either. That's common, but Amanita phalloides can be pure white to cream, yellow-green, light brown, all the way to bronze. These were picked from a cluster of like 20 that were growing packed together, all touching, and you can see the variability in color just within that one cluster. So we don't have Amanita phalloides, to my knowledge, this far inland over here yet, right? But yeah, it's all up in, it's native to Europe. It's all up and down the east and west coast, but it is working its way inland. Just last year, it was positively identified by DNA sequence analysis from Idaho. So it's moving around. It seems to be able to jump onto and pair up with lots of different types of host trees. So it's probably only a matter of time till it works its way all across North America, I suspect. But anyways, it's super common in the Bay Area of California, in a few other parts of North America, super common in Europe as well. Everybody picking mushrooms for the table, which is everybody picking mushrooms in Europe. Everybody knows about this, and they usually don't have a problem with it because they learn mushrooms. Around here, what you're more likely to encounter from this section of the genus are things like the pure white destroying angels. And this is sort of a problem because the destroying angels are all pretty similar looking and mostly pure white. Most of the time, if someone finds a destroying angel, the name Amanita bispora gets placed on it, whether it's truly that species or not. Again, it's hard to know. One thing about this guy is they're mostly quite small and spiggy. They only get just 3-4 inches tall, usually. If you see something bigger and more robust, it's probably some other closely related species. And according to the expert, this species, as its name indicates, does always have only 2 spores per basidia, or per basidium on the gill, not 4 like most other basidiomycetes. So anyways, despite its small size, of course, it should still be considered deadly poisonous. There's a number of lookalikes that look like destroying angels. There's a lot of white mushrooms out there, agaricus and leucoagaricus and lepiodas and a lot of things. So you for sure want to know what you're doing when you're collecting mushrooms. The scene here was photographed in Wisconsin several years ago. This was on a lawn, and there was a great big tree on the lawn, and it was very late fall, like around frost time. So if you recall what mushrooms are happening about that time of the year here, especially on lawns, you'll probably know this mushroom here. So leucoagaricus. They can be super common. There's a number of common names for them. The smooth lepiota, gray lepiota. David Aurora calls it fat woman on a bicycle, which I think is a cool name. I have no idea what fat woman on a bicycle means, but it's the funniest whole name. Anyways, they are edible. They're kind of bland, but you can pick lots and lots of them late in the season. Anyways, under this tree on this lawn area, there were probably hundreds of leucoagaricus and probably many dozens of this white destroying angel. And again, I keep pointing out this tree because leucoagaricus is not mycorrhizal. It doesn't need trees to fruit. This Amanita does need trees to fruit, so it sort of was the perfect situation where both would be together. So leading a mushroom walk, and I go over and grab up a whole bunch hastily and literally throw them into my basket like most people would do because they want to rush off to pick other things. So I intentionally picked it how people in a hurry would do without carefully digging up the mushroom. So you can see in my hand here just how similar a destroying angel looks to the other mushroom because something is missing when I just grabbed it and pulled it out of the ground. The saccate vulva, the big honking cup that should be under there, that's gone. Well, when you bring stuff in like that to the table, now we don't really know what this is. You know, same could be said if you slice this mushroom off here and here. It's basically the same mushroom now. So you have to be really careful to definitely get all the substrate and all of the mushroom there for a good ID. More often than not, in the upper Midwest, we see this destroying angel is certainly the largest of all the destroying angels in North America. This is Amanitas of North, and you have this around here. I'm not sure how common it is. I suspect it's probably pretty common. But it can be quite massive, for sure, a foot tall, the cap a foot across. You can see some of these up here are bruisers in size. And this was at a rest stop in Minnesota or Wisconsin several years ago. Most of them came out of someone's basket. Someone had stopped at the rest stop. I pulled in the rest stop and he was already running around. Basket was full of these. I'm like, oh, what do you got there? Like, oh, I got these mushrooms. They look great. I'm like, yeah, they do look great. You know, those are deadly poisonous, right? He's like, oh no, really? And so then he didn't want to take them with him. So here's the two astounding things. That you're so cavalier, you really don't know what you're picking, but you know they look good enough, you're gonna take them home. Now someone you don't even know who that person is, you're like, oh, well, that person has authority. Now I'm just gonna ditch the mushrooms. So I couldn't believe people can be like that, but I mean, without a doubt, if any few of these were made into a meal, the consumers in the family probably would have wound up dead, because this is one of the deadly species and they're quite large. They are really pretty. The one thing about the name Sub-Alliaceae means it smells like alliaceous plants, onions and garlic and things. The sub part means not so much. It really doesn't have any smell like that at all. I've never noticed any onion smell with these, and neither is Ron Tullis. Anyone familiar with these mushrooms? Have you ever smelled onions? John's shaking his head. Anyways, is this one pretty commonly picked around here? Okay, so nobody. Well, you'll have to DNA it, as they say, and then determine. Anyways, it's probably my favorite one from the group, just because they get so big and massive and pretty. So just to emphasize, a lot of different destroying angels in the area for sure, how to tell them apart. And they're all like, well, there is one thing you can do. If you're the type of person that likes to lug a bunch of chemicals in the woods like John does, for sure, you would want to have this compound, potassium hydroxide, KOH. A number of the white destroying angels will turn bright lemon yellow within a few seconds of squirting this liquid on the cap. But a number of them are not. They'll react negatively. So this photo has Sub-Alliaceae and Sturgeon's destroying angel on the right, but sometimes they don't always react to KOH. So here's a mixed collection of Sub-Alliaceae here, which turned yellow. And then the other guys here are the species Amanita ID Made. You can see they look identical, right? But when treated with KOH, the dropper straight here, there's even a drop of liquid here. KOH is clear, straight here and straight here, no yellow color. So that's one way to tell them apart. You can look at the spore size on these and tell them apart too, but I'm too lazy to do that. So I just use chemicals or just make up a name. Everybody else does. So what's the deal with why they're so toxic? So this one section produces a compound, a group of compounds called amatoxins. So none of the other groups of Amanitas produce these amatoxins. Other groups can produce other toxins, but not this deadly poison. So this is really the only deadly group of Amanitas that we have in the world. The one thing about this compound is we don't really know any sort of purpose that it serves for the mushroom, but it must be of some importance because this compound has evolved multiple times down through mushroom evolution. So gallerinas are deadly because they produce amatoxins. There are deadly lepiotas. Some of the small woodland lepiotas produce this, and probably some other mushrooms as well. It's a great big molecule, great big ring structure, so you'd think it would be expensive to make. So I suspect it performs a service for the mushroom, but we just don't know. What we do know is this compound is quite poisonous to mammals. Older books will say it's poisonous to all animals and like the worst thing on the planet. It's really not. It's poisonous to most mammals, probably not all mammals, certainly humans, but not poisonous to a number of other groups of animals. For sure, the mushroom flies that eat these, slugs that eat these, they don't have a problem. Is there a question in that? Yeah, so the question was how mushroom flies can digest this chemical. That's actually, believe it or not, all been completely found out over a bunch of elegant studies by colleagues of mine, because I've worked on mushroom flies. And it involves these cytochrome P450 enzymes that are in organisms to detoxify things. We have cytochrome P450s. Mushroom flies have a group that allows them to break down this compound. And how it was found out was they gave flies amatoxin, mushrooms with amatoxins, but then they also gave them stuff on their feet to block all these other different types of antitoxin enzymes in them. And that's the only one whereby if they block it now, the flies can no longer eat the mushrooms. So yeah, if you Google like mushroom, well, if you Google mushroom flies in my name, stuff like that. I wasn't the discoverer. Someone that was a lot more clever than me discovered it, but it's a pretty cool story how these flies have figured this out, I think. Anyways, that's a good question. So okay, so testing for this compound. So down through the ages, there's been, people wanted to try to figure out how to test for this sort of substance. Oh, I'm doing great. Yeah, hours. So down through the ages, there's been tests for this sort of stuff, but it hasn't worked really well. All the mushroom books and websites and stuff will talk about this newspaper test or the Whelan test or the Meister-Whelan test. Don't even bother trying it. It doesn't work that well. It takes newsprint. Not all kinds of newsprint will work. It's more art than science. It's a big pain. Basically involves old-fashioned newsprint. You take the mushroom and squeeze it and try to get all the drops of juice to fall in one concentrated spot, and then you circle it real quick before it dries and it vanishes. And then once it's dried, then you can dab concentrated nitric acid on it, which is not safe, and to be hauling around. And then sometimes you'll get kind of a blue-green color, or if you do this in real bright sunlight, that doesn't make it doesn't work too well. There's a whole bunch of nuances to it. So it can work, you can see here. You can also see this was we might put some titles on it. That's just how it's to do. So it doesn't work super duper well. But however, a new test that just came out a couple of years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, by a researcher at the USDA in California, Candace Beaver, she developed an antibody test in it, which works super, super well. If no one in your club has this, I urge you to go to the amatoxtest.com site and buy these test kits. They look, like test kits you probably have at your home now for other things that are that will remain unmentioned. So they work super well, super sensitive, and I've performed these at 4A's numerous times. They work super cool. So what you can do is, the point of these tests isn't really for testing mushrooms. The point is for hospitals to have these to test blood and urine of patients who may be eaten amatoxin containing mushrooms. Because up until now, if someone comes in with a mushroom poisoning, suspected of mushroom poisoning, there's not much you can do. You can give them lots of liquids, pack their stomach with charcoal, and hope for the best. There's really not a lot you can do. If you know for sure, you can start doing other things right away. Anyways, the test is so sensitive that you can detect amatoxin in urine as well as blood. So those are super tiny amounts. In fact, to do the test, here's what you do. If you recall from doing your COVID test at home, you open the box, there's a little microfuge tube in the, if I mentioned this stuff in this box 5 years ago, almost no one in the room would know what any of these things are. Every one of you probably taken one of these tests at home. There's a little tiny microfuge tube. It can only hold just like 2 or 3 drops of water. And there's a little drop of plastic dropper in there. And you take a piece of your mushroom or blood or urine, but we're going to use mushroom because that's less sticky. So a piece of your mushroom, the mushroom can be dried or fresh. And you know how tiny these tubes are. You break off a piece small enough to fit in there. So that's a piece like small enough to fit in your fingernail. Put it in there, 3 drops of water, 4 drops of water, whatever. And then shake it up for 60 seconds. And then the dropper that comes with the kit, take out 3 drops and you squirt it right into the little bell, just like you do a COVID test, and wait a few seconds. And if you get one line, like COVID test, one line is positive, 2 lines and it's negative. So these tests are so sensitive that you have to be very careful not to get false positives. If you handle all the mushrooms here, some of which have endotoxin, some don't, all of them would be positive just from touching them and then handling the test kit. It's insane how sensitive they are. But anyways, this was at a foray, and so we had collected fresh Amanitas of North, you see here. And this I brought to the foray. This is a Western destroying angel, Amanita ocriana. I just so happen to have lots of dried deadly mushrooms at home, or whatever. And then we tried Amanita persicina, which doesn't produce endotoxins. We had the false death cap, Amanita lavindula, just showed you pictures of those. So that's this guy here. And then someone had collected some deadly galleritis and did the test. And every time we repeat it, worked super well. In fact, it worked too well. People had contaminated things. And so we had more things positive. So you can't really see the one single line here too well, but you can see the single line thing. So pretty cool. So if you don't have any of these in your group, why not get some? You can order them. They can literally sit in the package on the shelf forever. They don't have an expiration date or anything. And I have some that are several years old and using. So it's a really cool and very sensitive test. Okay, so moving on to this group here, the Muscaria group, and this will probably be the. I'll show you some Caesars at the very end of this. So the Muscaria group is super familiar to us. Our Muscarias out here in the east are more of a yellow color, maybe a little orange in the center, that have the white patches. Out west, of course, are the more sort of classic looking red Muscarias with white patches. This is what they look like in Asia and Europe as well. And we even have situations where in a single collection, you can see all 3 colors together, red, white, and yellow. These are all collected in the same patch. And so, of course, this is the subgenus Amanita, section Amanita. So these should have a straight margin. You can see it easily here. Can't see it so easily here because there's all these scales in there. But they also have this bulbous base and rings of vellum material on the top of the bulb. And just to remind you, the reason you see all these structures is because of how the mushroom developed from when it was a little baby. So there's one other one to mention. This is the Muscaria, variety Muscaria from Europe. This is the mushroom that's extremely invasive. It's spreading all over the world. It's in South America, Australia, New Zealand, all over Asia, Africa, all over South America, and it's even in North America now. It's all over Alaska, in parts of California, and also in parts of Massachusetts. So coming this way will be yet another red variety of Amanita muscaria. Some other ones in this group that look quite a bit like Muscaria, and the reason is because they're close relatives, are things like the pantherinoid types. Pantherinoids, instead of having about 3 or 4 rings of vellum material above and on the top of the bulbous base, they typically have one really big ring that's sort of like a collar. That's called a cothernate base. So the panthers feature that. You can see that in these guys here. This is Amanita multisquamosa. The Michael Quo calls it the white panther because they're a very light color. Very pretty. And then also this shows kind of a close-up. This is a gematoid from out west, but it has this nice collar look showing off really well. So looks like if you were wearing a socks and roll the sock down to your ankle, it's kind of rolled up. So both call this an ant racetrack. Ants presumably would get in there and just go around and couldn't figure out how to get out of there. And everybody knew that Tom passed away in November. A big loss to mycology. This is another one of the pantherinoid types from around here, Amanita velata bees. They can be quite sizable and chunky, often a big basal ball with this big cothernate base, really cool looking. And that's all from there. So here's some pretty pictures of Caesars, because this is a lot of people's favorite group of mushrooms. This is a Western Caesar, the Philpra. But Caesars are collected as food in Southeast Asia, for sure Europe, and in North America as well. Pretty much anywhere Caesars grow and people are confident of their identification will collect these things. These are some of my favorite mushrooms to eat for sure as well. They're quite delicious. Everybody knows Italians are cuckoo for porcini, when you go to a market that has both the ovally, the Caesars, and the porcini, the Caesars fetch a higher price because Italians are they're super crazy about Caesars. I love them. So this is preparation of Caesars. This is one of the mushrooms that are best eaten raw, and typically Italians would put slices of these right on top of the salad, just a simple salad with olive oil and maybe some coarse salt and a squeeze of lemon, and that's it. It's super aromatic. The small ones you can shave with a truffle shaver. This is a good way, in my opinion, actually the best way, in my opinion, to do small king bolete buttons as well. Shave them as sort of a crudo mushroom salad. Very, very aromatic, and it doesn't take much of a mushroom, maybe one, to put in an entire salad. You don't eat a whole lot of raw mushroom and worry about getting it sick. This picture, by the way, is me preparing Caesars taken by the late Mary Lidkoff when we were doing an event in California. And so this is that mushroom. I have a lot of different little Easter eggs in the book, in pictures and things, because of a lot of people claiming, oh, this would never happen, these mushrooms never look like that, or whatever. So I put pictures in there just to point out that these things for sure can happen. There's some very famous mycologists on the West Coast that point out that there's no way people should be picking these spring cocora and worrying at all about confusing them with death caps because they don't occur at the same time of the year. So pictures like that, prove otherwise. There's death caps in this picture, as well as the delicious spring cocora. In the front, you might be able to tell them apart, but there's no way people in the back can tell these apart. This was on a playground, elementary school playground. So, and again, this is one of my favorite mushrooms to eat, but there's sometimes when, you don't want to take a chance. So besides the stripe cap margin that the Caesars have, that the destroying angels and death caps do not have, there's one other way to tell them apart. You can slice them open. The Caesar group all have these hollow stems. And when the Caesars are small and in the button stage or egg stage, that hollow part of the stem is sort of filled with a kind of a gelatin type stuff. But you can see this mushroom when it's mature is going to be that really bright orange color. It's showing off the orange polyphyllus stem. So around here we have Caesars too, including Amanita jacksonii, and probably some others that look kind of like jacksonii that don't have a name just yet. True Amanita jacksonii, which a long time ago was called the North American Amanita caesaria, but now we call it jacksonii, named for the famous Canadian naturalist. The true jacksonii, besides being orange, should have a lot of orange material on the stalk. I point this out because there's a common one around here that the stalk is pure yellow and doesn't have that material. So be on the watch when you're collecting mushrooms this year. But some other Caesars we have can range in other colors, kind of golden or brown. So this is one of the bronze Caesars, Amanita Banningiana, named for Mary Elizabeth Banning, who was a prominent member a long time ago in the Minnesota Mycological Society. Real pretty common Caesar around here. And then we have yellow Caesars as well. Amanita Arkansana and Cahokia. These are pure yellow, maybe a tiny bit of bronze color right in the center part of the cap. And usually it's a very pure, bright lemon yellow color, lemon yellow gills. The colors here are a little off. They're not exactly as they appear on my screen, but they're often quite a pretty mushroom. You can see this guy. This was at the Missouri Mycological Society for a long time ago. This was Leland. Unfortunately, he passed away quite a few years ago, but this was just the most striking, great big yellow Caesar Amanita. Stalk is yellow, gills will be yellow as well, because again, all the mushrooms in the genus Amanita will be usually white gills, except the Caesars can be kind of a pale yellow. And I think just a couple more images here. This is these are sort of tan-colored Caesars, Berylliana and Spreta, the so-called hated Amanita. This guy, this Caesar here has this really interesting kind of a small saccate bulb at the bottom that also kind of flares open like a tulip. The other thing about Amanita Spreta, it's pretty common, but I think it gets misidentified a lot. The habitat where I always see it seems to be kind of right on the edge of the woods going into the lawn area. I don't know what's going on there. I don't really see them in the woods so much, and definitely not in the lawn away from trees. Kind of right on the edge, sort of out on the where it gets a little bit more sunlight. anyways, something to be on the lookout this year. I think one more. So this is my last slide. This is, I think, yeah, this is my last slide. So most of the Caesars I showed are these big honking things, really easy to spot. But there's also some super tiny Caesars. And these are some of the smallest Amanitas known. They're hardly ever collected and ID'd, and a lot of people consider them rare. I think they're probably quite common, just people don't see tiny mushrooms. This is Amanita Virginia and sperm. But you can see, this is a little ruler here, how tiny these little guys are. These are mature mushrooms. They have a little tiny ring right there, little tiny cup, but they're super plant sized. Very prominent stripe margins on their little tiny little caps. And this is Pachysperma here. Pachysperma, although it's a super tiny Amanita, it has the largest spores of all species of Amanita. What's with that? Who knows? Anyways, cute little guys to look out for that. Again, not pretty common. People don't really notice them just because it's fancy. So I think we'll end there. And if you have questions, I'll take questions. And likewise, if you want to buy books or whatever, we can do that at the end and I can take time. So thanks for your time. Okay, you have questions, right? Yeah. This way, we'll do that. Okay. So the first pen that went up kind of appeared in the middle. Yes.
Thank you. Great talk. I was curious for toxins and how.
So the question is, how much of the amatoxin, I guess, do you need to eat that can be lethal? So I don't know that anyone really knows. What I do know is a long time ago, books would say the death rate of eating Amanitas is something like 80%. Meaning if you ingested one or more of these in a meal, chances of you dying are like 80%. You know, it's not really that high. So in North America, it's now thought that 50% of the time that someone ingests these, they are killed, which is still pretty high, but not as high as it used to be. In Europe, it's actually much less because I think people know how to avoid them, know when they've eaten them, and the physicians there, because they've been treating people eating mushrooms for centuries, they have a little bit better handle on how to. But anyway, so it seems 50% likely. It's really hard to know because a lot of times when you're on Facebook, you see all the knuckleheads like, can you eat this? And someone shouts it, absolutely. And I'm like, I'm not even sure that's a mushroom because your hand is not in focus holding the ground. And then people are chiming in with the story. You can for sure eat that. And others are like, oh, that's something else. So I think a lot of times when people get poisoned by mushrooms, they don't go to the hospital, and therefore we don't even know about them. You know, when I used to teach microbiology and courses like that at universities, the number of food poisonings in North America every year, hundreds of thousands of people, but physicians are quick to point out, that's from people that are so sick that they're like almost on their deathbed and go to the hospital. Everyone in here has been poisoned by food, but maybe not severe enough to go to the hospital. You know, you like to eat Wendy's and Jack in the Box, you're going to get poisoned. So, you know, I've been poisoned by both of them. So, plain and simple. So, you know, it can happen. So, these poisons we don't really know, but for sure, quite deadly and not something to sneeze at. By the way, two other groups of Amanitas that I didn't cover, the Lepidolus, have kidney toxins, not deadly, but pretty severe. People out west encounter them when they're picking matsutake because they look similar. Again, not deadly. All the ones in the Muscaria and the Panther group, those also are poisonous, not deadly, but still nothing to take too lightly. You can put Muscaria in water and detoxify them if you want. And the Amanita book talks about this, and people talk on the internet about it. The phalloidy group is the one that's deadly. If you can't put the toxin out, that doesn't work. If they're toxic, it's probably another question over here. Yes, sir.
Are all the Amanita Caesar types, all of them have hollow stems?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, all Caesar Amanitas have hollow stems, and so do all the vaginata types. And all Vaginata types and pseudotypes should be considered edible, and some, I think, a lot of them are kind of spindly and not really of much count, but they are all known to be safe. Another question? Who else have? Okay, yes, sir. So this is a very good question I get asked all the time. So you're for sure going to be encountering deadly mushrooms this year. Should you be wearing gloves or worry about it? Here's the story on that. No. So all mushrooms, there are no mushrooms in the world that are so dangerous you cannot handle them, including the death cap. You can take a bite of it and taste it in your mouth, and this will impress upon you, including the destroying agents around here. This will impress upon you how easily people get poisoned. They have a delicious taste. They don't taste bitter or gross or foul. You can take a small bite and taste it, of course, spit it out. But it's totally safe to do that. Totally safe to put deadly Amanitas in your basket with the edible specimens you're going to eat. When you get home, make sure what you're doing is you separate them. And furthermore, spores from deadly Amanitas. What if they fall onto my safe edibles? Totally safe. There was a research paper just a couple of years ago trying to determine how much toxin was in the spores. It was basically none. I think they determined you have to take like a shovel full of spores and eat it in one sitting, and it was still safe. So yes, no problems handling it. So this, I mean, for people in here, the question, may or may not sound kind of implausible, but I've seen numerous times on TV shows naturalists in a situation where these were growing in an urban setting, and they were advising the homeowner how to get rid of them. Like, well, first put on gloves, then dig it up, put it in a bag and seal it, and then put it in the trash. Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, they're not so dangerous that you have to worry about it. These same naturalists probably have a number of poisonous plants in their homes. All up and down the highways in Southern California, there's oleander, which is way more deadly. People have aconite at their house and all sorts of plants that are way more poisonous than mushrooms and don't bat an eye. But stuff like the Last of Us and other things gives us a bad name. So one other point I wanted to make about the poisonous mushrooms and collecting, and now it's slipped my mind. Anyways, they're totally safe to handle. Look about, think about, whatever. Just know what you're putting in. You have a question?
Yeah, you mentioned a mushroom from Europe that's spreading around with the Amanitas.
Yeah.
Are there drawbacks to that?
Okay, so the question is about the Amanita muscaria, variety muscaria from Europe that's invasive all over the world. And there's other invasive mushrooms too. And most of our most economically important plant pathogens on our crop plants, pretty much all those are invasive species as well. So there's a lot of fungi that are invasives that we have to worry about. But what about the mushrooms? So yeah, the thing with invasive mushroom species, and we have invasives from elsewhere that have come here. Some of our species have gone elsewhere and are invasive. It goes both ways. So yeah, some things about those no one really knows, but it's suspected that some of these really aggressive types glom onto a host and maybe force out native mycorrhizal types and thus simplify habitat. And maybe, okay, so, any given tree like a red oak or a chinkapin oak or whatever, maybe it can potentially host 50 or 100 different species of mushrooms. This invasive muscaria hogs up all the roots, so none of those are on this tree now. Well, some of those, no doubt, can be hosted by other different species of tree, no problem. But there's some of those mushrooms may be mycorrhizal with some trees that only have one or two types of mycorrhizal obligate mutualistic fungi, in which case that could spell a problem for those species. So anytime you simplify the diversity of a habitat, these are the things that happen. It can be a chain reaction. So I'm trying to think of situations where invasive species of mushrooms have come in and forced out other things. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but it's being documented right now. Another thing that's coming in that's got a lot of people worried is this golden oyster mushroom, Orotis cyprinopiliatus, which I don't know if you have around here yet, It's super common in other parts of the Midwest, for sure Wisconsin and Illinois, I see it all the time, so it's probably around here. Okay. Yeah, so this thing is kind of a plus because it's super common, fruits like crazy, pretty tasty mushroom, but it's so aggressive, it's probably going to force out some other wood rot fungi that are less aggressive. And, you know, what's the role of those fungi? We don't even know. We know almost nothing about fungi in general. We know maybe 1 to 5% at most of all the species of fungi. The rest we don't know anything about. We've never seen them and don't have a name for them. The 1 to 5% maybe that we do know and have a name for, like the mushrooms I just showed you here, we know next to nothing about their life cycle, you know, how they get around, do they reproduce asexually as well as sexually, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, obviously they play an important role in the environment and we don't really much know. So these are all really good questions. Is there another question somewhere? Yes, sir.
First slide you had, it said that yellow Caesar, don't confuse with other Caesars. Right, what is it, Amanita, Arkansas, and a
Yeah.
But for those also Caesar mushrooms, Caesar mushrooms, don't like eat, is that what that meant?
No. Question was the slide that I said, don't confuse this yellow Caesar for this other yellow Caesar, nor for the bronze Caesars, because they do get kind of confused. There's no worry of collecting any of the Caesar mushrooms for the table and then getting poisoned. All of them are considered edible. The comment is just that, in particular, just in the last couple of years, there's been a number of arguments on Mushroom Observer and other places about whether this yellow Caesar that people were collecting was Cahokia or Arkansana. They're very tough to know one from the other. Cahokia was considered to have a small range around the Cahokia, where the Cahokia people live, where the Cahokia Mountains are near St. Louis. And now its range is thought to, you know, be far up and into the north. So a lot of people are confused which one is which. It doesn't much matter if you're collecting for the table. And frankly, the point of this talk and the point of the book is, and frankly, whenever I am doing mushroom identification, I don't really get too concerned with which species you have. If you can get it to genus, that's pretty good. And in the case of Amanitas, you can be pretty certain you can get the mushroom you're holding in your hand, you know, down further, down into which section of the genus. If you know the section, you're pretty much home free, even if you don't know the exact species. If you know it's in the section Caesar, if it's in the Vaginata section or the Panthernoid section, honestly, that's pretty much good enough because you know whether it's dangerous or not, or edible or not, or some other things about its life cycle. But yeah, there's no concern you might pick the wrong Caesar if you're collecting it for the table. Any other questions? Am I all finished? So, okay, well, thank you for your time. If anyone needs books, I can come right over. Oh, good. Bill, we'll worry about that in the class, but it's pretty confident that won't be a big problem. Probably work out. Pretty well. That'd be great. Oh yeah, no, I would use it. Take that on. Yes, so that was
You can find because yeah. All of us.